All right, we are at 12:01, so I am going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I usually am doing these committed to community webinars with another speaker, so I am going to be sitting here talking to myself for an hour, but I'm really glad to see that we have some folks signed on here on the Zoom account and some others joining us on Facebook Live. Welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We are excited today to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at the Chamber, what our staff have been up to. As we've been hosting these committed to community webinars, we've gotten a lot of questions just kind of about the state of the Chamber and where are we going as an organization? What are some of the impacts that this virus has had on our operations and our organization? And then also, I just want to provide an opportunity for folks to ask questions about impacts to the community, impacts to other businesses. Obviously, myself and our staff have been having a lot of conversations with businesses over the last couple of months. So as much as we can provide answers to the questions that you might have, I want to make sure that we leave some time to do that. I do have a short presentation just to kind of walk you through, like I said, some of the stuff that the Chamber has been working on. Those of you who have been members for a long time, we highly appreciate your support, and you've kind of seen the Chamber through several different crises. None like this, of course. This is very different than anything that we've ever experienced, but our Chamber has been around for over 100 years, and as an organization, we've been strong and we remain strong, but we're impacted just like a lot of businesses have been. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Like I said, some of the things that we've been working on as well. So welcome. If you're just joining us, I'm seeing a few more people logging on. Thank you. We're going to go ahead. I am going to share my screen here to walk through this presentation. So let's go ahead and do that. Hi, I'm seeing some people pop on. All right, make sure that works. Okay, go ahead and put this in presentation mode so you guys can see that. So today I did want to talk a little bit about, we've kind of been looking at the recovery of this crisis and the way it's impacting our community in 3 different phases. And those 3 phases really help make up the roadmap to recovery that we're really trying to pursue. This first phase is recovery. So how are we recovering? As a community, really, this was our focus in the first couple of months of this, right? And in emergency management and disaster response, that first few days, weeks after whatever the disaster is really recovery time. And with this crisis, it's been very different. It's not like there was one single event and we knew we could move on to rebuilding our community. We've been responding and figuring out how to do that. Then moving into rebuilding phase, what does it look like in the medium term? How do we help businesses reopen? How do we help people get back to some sort of semblance of what we're calling our new normal? And then lastly, long-term, how do we make sure that we're revitalizing our community? Long-term is not typically thought about in a few months out, but in this case, we're talking about long-term as soon as we can. We want to know what we need to do in order to get us back to where we were with a strong economy here locally. So talking a little bit about, see my slide will project, there we go. So recover. As a chamber, we really quickly pivoted to working from home, as most of our office businesses have. I know a lot of our restaurants and hospitality, they had to close up shop, and so a lot of their folks were laid off. For us, we knew what we needed to do right away was to figure out how to distill and deliver valuable and reliable information to our businesses the best way that we possibly could. So we very quickly stood up a COVID-19 resource page. There's lots of resources out there now, which we're really glad that there's, a lot of stuff that folks can access, but we were concerned about people actually feeling like they were getting reliable information. The second thing that we wanted to do was to make sure we stayed connected to our members and provided content as frequently as we could to be helpful. So we started these committed to community webinars. We've hosted about 18 of them now. And so they've been going on for a couple months. In the beginning, there were tons of questions, right? From financing to regulatory issues to unemployment. So we brought in experts and hosted webinars. All of those are on our website. So if you had missed any of those, you can go back and watch those webinars. We've had a lot of really great interaction and response to those. Thank you to our members. Member outreach, it was really important for us too to understand how were our businesses actually getting, how are they being affected by this? So we have about 1,200 members as the Eugene Chamber of Commerce, and our staff split those up, and we started reaching out individually to those chamber members just to find out how folks were doing. That initial outreach really helped direct the work that we've been doing for the last couple months, because we were really able to understand what businesses wanted and needed. Things are changing rapidly though, and so last week, we sent out a follow-up survey to our membership to kind of find out what are the big issues that you're facing now? What are the things that you're most concerned about? We'll talk a little bit about that. We started doing virtual candidate forums. So while a lot of things have been put on pause, our elections are one of them that has not. And we, all of you should have received your ballots by now. Those are due next Tuesday. If you have not voted, I highly encourage you to do so. But we wanted to make sure our members could continue to get good information about who the candidates that were running for office in our area were. And so we've been hosting virtual candidate forums. Those are also posted on our website. So if you were not able to watch any of those, you can go back and see who the candidates are and get to know them a little bit better. The second kind of area we wanted to focus on was business marketing and support. As businesses were kind of shaken by this, we knew that a lot of folks were having a ton of change going on and needed a way to get the word out as quickly as they could. And so we shifted our social media strategy to really be focused on helping businesses get the word out about what their status was. So as folks have been copying or tagging the chamber on Facebook and Instagram, we've been resharing that information. We've gotten lots of really great stories and feedback from folks, businesses who were able to get their message out, just helping for the chamber to use the platform to help them do that. We also created an open for business and Eugene food scene guide to help folks find where they could get delivery or pickup for the restaurants who are closed, and then ultimately transition to a full open for business. So any businesses who are still open and operating could submit, and we were listing those publicly. We are working on creating an update. So now that hopefully when the county gets approved to reopen, folks can submit the date that they're planning to reopen so we can start to build out a database and when businesses will be reopened to the public. Another kind of interesting activity that we were involved in is working with companies who are chamber members that were providing either medical equipment or they were involved in testing. They had testing capabilities. We have a lot of really, really great and innovative companies in our community that shifted or were already kind of working in this space. So they've been a really valuable resource to our state and to the country, honestly. And so the chamber was able to help connect those businesses to the state resources to figure out how they could plug in. And additionally, we have folks on our team who've been helping to distribute PPE to fire department, to some of our medical professionals, and then helping to distribute PPE to folks who are now starting to think about reopening. That's a conversation that we're continuing to have as an organization. And the last thing that we really focused on in this initial phase was figuring out how to navigate the funding and regulatory issues. So we were really focused on the business loan programs, digesting all that information, and then putting information back out for our members so they could more easily understand and access that funding. As you know, those funding programs are continuing to change. There's new regulations coming out regularly from the state and the federal government, and we've been following those very closely. Local, state, and federal advocacy has been a huge focus of ours around coronavirus, but also around all these other things that we've been continuing to do that we were doing before this crisis. Federal loan programs, tax relief. We're part of a larger statewide business group coalition that's advocating for tax relief. We pushed really hard on the corporate activity tax, pushed really hard to have unemployment benefits go into place that first week that folks were laid off. So some of those things are obviously still changing and have yet to be realized, but we're continuing to push really hard on the advocacy page as well. So in May and June, we're sort of shifting into this rebuilding phase. How do we make sure that we're working with businesses to get back to business and provide resources? The way that we're doing that, I think, and being the most effective is by working with our partners to maximize impact. We're sort of an all hands on deck type of community when it comes to economic support for businesses and for community members. And we've got really great partners in the city of Eugene and Lane County, the Springfield Chamber, the city of Springfield. Over the weekend, our staff kind of pulled off a Herculean effort to take all of the guides that were released last Friday from the governor on how to reopen your businesses, digest all of that and put it into an easy to sort of use format in a back to business guide. If you haven't seen it yet, we just launched it about an hour ago through our membership email blast. It's on our website. It'll be going out on social. It's a great resource for businesses, organized by industry. We're going to continue to update that as more regulations are released from the state level. So that back to business guide really was a collaboration between the Eugene and Springfield chambers, and we're really proud to put that out there. Our chamber, the Eugene Chamber, is convening a business recovery task force, and we'll have our first meeting this Friday. We have industry representatives from a diverse set of industries, and we're going to kind of meet for the first time and figure out what does recovery for our community look like, and how do we continue to involve a broader coalition of businesses to make sure that when we're talking about business recovery, when we're talking about what resources or programs our elected officials can get behind, that it's actually coming from businesses, and the advice and the things that people need are really straight from business owners' mouths. We also are working to boost our capacity to support economic recovery. I'll talk a little bit about some of the financial impacts that this crisis has had on the chamber, but we're really excited to have launched back in January a 501c3 subsidiary of the Eugene Chamber called Onward Eugene. And this organization was built for economic development and economic prosperity for our region. And now more than ever that's exactly what we're going to need. And so Onward Eugene sort of serendipitously was launched at a time when we needed something just like that to really get into a rebuilding phase. So we're going to be rolling out some of the activities that come out of this business recovery task force through Onward Eugene. So folks can participate. We can focus on the things that are important to rebuilding our economy. So then we're going to move on to revitalization, right? It's going to take some time for things to get back to normal, but we know that we need to plan ahead. We need to figure out what is it that we can do right now to set our community up for success 6 to 8 to 12 months down the road. For the chamber, that's going to mean reimagining a lot of things that we've done one way that maybe won't be able to be done, at least in the medium to long term after this crisis. For instance, events. We host a lot of in-person events. You guys obviously attend and participate in those. And those are going to have to look different for the time being. But we want to make sure that we're continuing to bring the most value that we can to our members. So if we are shifting and pivoting the events that we're offering, we want to make sure that if we're going digital, that it's content that's really valuable and that it's a way that's really accessible to all of our members. We do know that there's a handful of opportunities that we were already planning to offer that can be shifted to a digital platform, and that we have heard from folks is still going to be really valuable. The first is our economic summit. Now more than ever, I think people are really curious to see how our economy is going to react and respond to this. So we are planning to move forward with our economic summit event. Whether it's partially in person, partially virtual, it's kind of a moving target at this point, but we're moving forward with that. We also heard from our members that talent and leadership development was something that they were really interested in right now. As folks are either unemployed, underemployed, or businesses are really trying to make sure that the staff that they have are as valuable as they possibly can be to the company. Talent and leadership development is super important. So we're working on some broad scale leadership development activities that can be adopted throughout the community, and that businesses can use those resources internally. We're also working on business startup and stabilization workshops. So whether you're a company who has been hit by this crisis and you're really trying to figure out how do you make sure that you get your business back in order, or maybe you're somebody who was either laid off or now you're underemployed and you've had this burning business idea for a while. A lot of new businesses come out of economic recessions or times of crisis like this. How can we help make sure that folks who are interested in that have resources that they can look to help to do that well? We're also going to look at networking opportunities that are just going to be hosted in a different way. I think that there's always going to be a need for connecting with people, really trying to build relationships. That's how business is done, especially in a community like ours. And so we want to make sure we can continue to provide those opportunities. For instance, the Chamber's Greeters program, which is a wonderful place to build relationships. And really get to know a lot of small business owners in our community. They've moved online. We don't know how long it'll have to be that way, but they've really taken advantage of this time to continue to network and to keep those relationships. So that's just one example. Our Young Professionals program has done the same thing. They're hosting coffee meetups, networking events in the evening. So while it's definitely not the same as walking up and giving someone a handshake, there is still value, and we've been able to connect folks and really help them continue to stay in touch with folks. And lastly, we're really going to be focusing on using a collective impact model to get as much done as we can for the community. We know as the Chamber, as a small nonprofit, we can only do so much on our own. And by bringing in partners who are working on some of the same work that we are, identifying metrics that we all agree on that we're trying to move and impact, and pursuing solutions together, everything's going to be more efficient and it's going to be more sustainable. A lot of times, again, in economic crisis, that's when you see a lot of organizations kind of either merging formally or really trying to partner for a lot more activities. And I think it's healthy for a community like ours to try to become more efficient and to, like I said, be able to stabilize the activities that we really want to get done. We're going to focus on business recovery and retention, entrepreneurial ecosystem building, like I mentioned, regional marketing and business recruitment. This definitely is not something that I think needs to be off the table during this time. Our community's got a lot of assets. Lane County so far has fared pretty well as far as the health crisis is gone. And I think it has a lot to do with our geography, the way our businesses interact with each other, where we're located in the country. There's a lot of assets that I think businesses may be looking for in the future. And the last one, like I said, is talent and leadership development. So those are kind of the three phases that we're trying to think about how to help support businesses into a recovery. I tend to think of things, and I like to be as transparent as possible. So I was putting this presentation together, and I couldn't help but think about the good, the bad, the ugly, and to end on a positive note, the silver lining. For me, the good is we have an incredible staff of passionate, capable individuals who have been working at 150% what they have been in the past, because we know we needed to show up for businesses in that way during this time. I also have seen I've seen a really positive shift from our elected officials. Eugene has got this reputation, while I think that it's an old narrative that we really want to try and change, for not being as business friendly. And, there's definitely been hiccups in the pieces that have been rolled out from the federal and some from the state as well. But what I have been seeing is our elected officials are really, really here to support local businesses, and they want to know how to do that. And so we're trying to take advantage of that interest and work with our elected officials to try and find ways to do that best. The bad, this has been incredibly stressful for our businesses, for our members, for our individuals. And that puts stress on the Chamber too. Our staff has kind of bared a lot of burden talking to businesses and just really feeling and empathizing with them for how hard this has been. And so, we've been trying to manage that stress for our staff as well. But it just is, it's a hard thing that we're all going through. And this fear of the unknown is just causing this angst that I think a lot of us are probably experiencing. I don't know about you, but for some reason this week, we sort of just hit this place where there's just built up frustration of, I just want things to get back to normal. So we're experiencing that as an organization as well. The ugly, the Chamber's main revenue sources are event revenue, sponsorship, and membership. And all three of those things were kind of cut off at the knees with this crisis. our membership is really dependent upon businesses being able to continue to support our work with their financial investment. And as businesses are struggling, we absolutely understand that maybe a chamber investment isn't the first thing that they've been able to commit to. While we do have some businesses, quite a few actually, who have been really generous in their continued support, and they've been impacted differently. And so we're incredibly grateful for those companies who've been able to continue along with their investment. As far as events go, we've had to put everything on pause, like a lot of folks have. And we're sort of sitting here holding our breath, not really knowing what events are going to look like for the rest of the year. Or, according to the governor's phased plan, phase 2 could go on until we have a vaccine. And so that is going to cause us to have to change a lot of things from what we were expecting this year to look like. So the chamber, to be totally frank, the chamber finances are at risk, like a lot of our small businesses are. So we're trying to get really creative as a staff and being responsible with our expenses. A lot of our staff, we've cut back hours. We did have to furlough a couple. And so we're trying to be responsible. We know that the resource we have come from our members. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to support you, but we're also being really fiscally responsible in the process. The silver lining, I think in a situation like this, and I'm a chronic optimist, crises tend to bring out these radical innovations. In a time when our community was really leaning into innovation already, this is going to, I think, propel a lot of those opportunities that we had to really provide value as the chamber, to provide value beyond our events, right? While our events are incredibly important to us, they're a means to an end, right? The end goal is that businesses, that they have these really strong relationships that build strong business that can help our community thrive. But they're a means to an end, and sometimes you got to find a different way to accomplish that. So while I'm not saying that we're going to stop all events going forward, we are going to get really creative and strategic with the ones that we're able to have. So it's been a time that I think our staff has really been open to this radical innovation that we weren't expecting to have to do. I mentioned our Back to Business guide. I want to make sure that you guys have access to that. Again, it's on our chamber website. You'll find it on our social media and in our e-news. And lastly, I wanted to make sure to just thank the folks who came in at the beginning of this year, having no idea that any of this was going to be impacting our community the way it did. And their investment and their continued support through this crisis has made it possible for our chamber to continue to do the work that we're doing. These sponsors have come in as annual investors, and they, we're hoping to get some visibility through our events that we're hoping will come back in the fall. But each one of them has expressed their support for our business community, for you all. And I think that's really important. The chamber is our members, and the chamber is the community, and the chamber is committed and courageous, and we're going to continue working on your behalf. We're going to have to overcome these struggles like all of our businesses have to, and we want to be there with you guys on the front lines as you do that. So that's the short presentation I have here, but I want to open it up for questions and just chat about some of the things that you guys are worried about and what you've been thinking. Heidi, I'm gonna bring you on in case you want to help with some questions here. Maybe if I can figure it out. All right. We do have a list of questions coming, so that's awesome.
Yeah, we totally have a list. So I just wanted to say, I think your audio cut out at the very end of your presentation. So I think you were thinking, and then after that, you had some wrap-up questions, or you had a wrap-up answer, and I didn't quite know if you wanted to finish that sentence.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure what happened there. I was just thanking our sponsors and for their continued commitment to our organization. And then just wanted to open it up for questions. So if folks have anything that they want to ask about, whether it's chamber related, business related, community related, we're here. So.
Totally. So I'll just introduce myself real quick. I am Heidi Bloodgood, the marketing coordinator at the Eugene Chamber of Commerce. And Brittany, it's awesome. We totally coordinated our outfits. I don't know how that. So yeah, we've had a couple questions coming in, and again, if you're watching on Facebook Live, please insert them, and we've got someone monitoring that. So the first one that we'll kind of open up with is, do you think the city will be mandating wearing masks? And what would you respond for when you have events coming up? What would you say is your general understanding of what's going to be happening with masks?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have not heard at all that the city will be mandating wearing masks. There are, however, in the governor's reopening guidelines, some of these industries, it is required that your employees are wearing masks. It is highly encouraged that the public is doing so. That's the advice that the CDC is putting out there. We've been following the CDC guidelines and the Lane County Public Health guidelines. And so if that's the recommendation that they'll put out there, then we'll continue to follow along with that. I know that there's a lot of mixed opinions out there about the effectiveness of masks, but I'm not expected. I'm not a public health expert. I'm not expecting our members to be. And so for us, leaning on the folks who we know are in those roles, that's what we're going to do. So yeah, you're going to see our chamber staff wearing masks when they're in and around the office. We would encourage folks at events to do that once we're able to meet in person, unless we hear otherwise.
Yeah, that's a great answer. We'll move over to sectors. So
Yeah.
some sectors are affected worse than others comparatively in this crisis. So how will the chamber prioritize where to focus its energy when it comes to specific industries?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We are, like I said, we're convening this business recovery task force. And with this initial convening, it was really important to me to try to get as diverse of industry representation as possible. So we have hospitality and restaurants and healthcare and manufacturing and professional services and kind of like office work, lawyers, et cetera. So we've really been trying to get as many folks, at least in that initial convening, so we can really identify better what have been the impacts of these different industries. And then we are going to have to put a little bit of focus. The chamber, a lot of our economic development work, because of the impact that, so let's see, how do I frame this? So economic development, when it comes to actually growing a local economy, a lot of that is dependent on traded sector business. So what does that mean? It means a business who's producing a good or service that's being sold to somebody outside of our community, or we have outside dollars coming in. That really is how you kind of continue to grow the pie, as opposed to kind of just shift dollars around within a community. And so we do have a strong focus on traded sector, our food manufacturers, our manufacturing, our hospitality industry, right? That is a traded sector. They're bringing in people from outside the community to help grow the pot here, if you will. So we're going to continue to focus on those traded sectors. But we also know our professional services are critical for our community to survive. So, we're going to have to figure out what the biggest levers that we can pull as a community to do as broad of scale recovery as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And based on what I've been seeing and witnessing as a staff member, I think it's been really awesome to see the energy go towards those things. So totally speak to that. So there seems to be some confusion about chamber and city relationship and collaboration between this whole process. So
Yeah.
can you speak to any specific collaboration and just also maybe talk about our relationship with the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Eugene Chamber of Commerce is a private nonprofit. So we are a 501c6 organization, which just a nugget of information to put out there. A lot of the financial resources that have been coming down from the federal or state government have been allocated to businesses or 501c3 nonprofits. As a 501c6, we've been excluded from a lot of those resources. So unfortunately, that's not something that we've been able to access. So the Paycheck Protection Program, some of the other loan programs from the state, we haven't been eligible to apply for. So we've been trying to navigate that, but it is a common misconception. We are a private nonprofit with a board of directors. It's made up of our members. Our members invest in the organization by joining, and we collaborate with the city, but we are not in any formal way connected to them. So, the city is a great resource. Obviously, important to business success is really good infrastructure. That means public safety, it means roads, it means internet access. All of those things have to be driven by our local government. And so we need to have strong relationships with them. But because we are not a part of it, we also have the ability to advocate on behalf of businesses for the things that we want to see. And so we have the ability and have very frequently pushed back whenever we've seen something coming out of the city that we do think is going to be hurtful to business.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, it's a very multifaceted, kind of complicated question, but I think it's on people's minds. So what if I can't pay my membership?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of folks who are going to be in that boat. And the last thing that we want to do is for a business who wants to continue to invest and participate in the chamber to feel like they can't. Our board of directors has indicated that they want us to continue to bill folks for their chamber memberships. But they've also directed us to work with people, right? So if you can't pay your membership, call us. We want to have a conversation. There's resources that we have. We are putting folks on monthly membership billing, which has reduced their initial investment significantly per month. We also are willing to kind of postpone if that's what it takes. Now is the time more than ever that we want to be there for them. And so don't just expect that if you can't pay that you're out. We want you to stick around. So just give us a call and we'll work on it with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about the work that the chamber was engaged in prior to COVID-19 versus now after COVID-19? Are there still major projects the chamber is going to try to continue to work on?
Absolutely. So I think this is also something that it's been interesting, right? Because we have all sort of as staff in some way, shape, or form had to shift what we've been working on to kind of focus on the here and now. But there's a lot of big picture issues that are still facing our community that the chamber is really plugged into. So our advocacy, for instance, our chamber has been focused on public safety for our community, the housing crisis that we're in, transportation. All of those issues are continuing to go on, right? So we have been plugged in, attending those meetings, advocating on your behalf. We've continued our regular meetings with the police chief, working on the public safety work. We're in conversation with the city right now about the payroll tax that's supposed to go into effect this upcoming January to help pay for that public safety infrastructure. Trying to make sure that we're not going to compromise the ability to improve our public safety here, but also continue to support business and figure out how we can do that best. So those are all the kinds of things that we're still doing. We're still running our young professionals program. A lot of that has shifted to virtual for now. Our women business leaders, they're continuing to convene. We have a women business leaders webinar now coming up in June. They've hosted wine nights. They've had great networking events. Our leadership development, our leadership program is continued. Economic development has kind of come to the forefront of our work because that's really, helping businesses survive is critical right now, but all this other stuff hasn't gone away. So we're still there. We're still working on it.
Yeah, I think there was a question that just came up about greeters, what networking opportunities are still happening other than greeters. I think you just answered it, but one thing that I'm curious about, or maybe they're curious about, was we have a business after hours that's pretty common. So maybe that's the type of event. What do you anticipate happening to that type of event?
Yeah, so our business after hours have historically brought in anywhere from 250 to 500 people. And so with the governor's requirements that our networking events, that any event is 100 people or less, that's one of those events that we're really trying to think, how do we rework this? That along with, in our membership survey that we sent out last week, there's about half of our members who responded that said that they still wouldn't feel comfortable going to an event that big, even if it was allowed. So that's something we're trying to navigate, is understanding that people are going to have different levels of comfort than maybe what's even required or allowed by the state or federal government. And so we are hoping to continue to have a handful of networking events in person towards the end of this year, given something else hasn't changed. In the meantime, like I said, we're really trying to think outside the box of how to create those opportunities, but just in smaller scales, right? How do we get folks together for lunch to help rebuild some of these restaurant customer bases? How do we How do we continue to pull together folks around their industry groups or around their positions to do some more industry support that way? So we're brainstorming. We're super open to ideas and suggestions. So if members have ideas, bring them to us because now's the time for us to innovate. Like I said.
Absolutely. I think that would be awesome. Let everybody tell us what they want. I think that's always great. So, so there's another mask question that came up, and I think, given our information, I believe what they need is a resource of somebody who would have the authority to answer this. But I will ask it. So, with wearing masks, if one of their employees is wearing a mask and it causes an injury, like they can't see or it catches on fire, this one's specific to the restaurant industry inside the kitchen. Is an employer responsible for that type of damage? And if you don't have the answer for that, who would you recommend they go ask that question to?
That's a really good question. So I can't answer this one specifically, but we will find a resource for you. But one thing that we have been doing a lot of research around is the potential increase in liability issues that businesses may be facing given this crisis. So we have been really active at the state and federal level advocating that businesses that they're going to be relieved from some of this liability, right? They didn't ask for it. If they're doing the best that they can and something were to happen, we want to make sure that businesses are as protected as possible. So there's a handful of questions like this that have come up that we don't have answers for yet. And so, I strongly encourage you to reach out to an employment attorney to make sure that you're documenting everything that you do. At this point, if you're working with an employee, if you're following the guidelines that's been put out that is different from how you've done business, document everything, because that's really going to be the one thing that you're going to be able to turn back to say, hey, you told me I had to do this. Here's what happened. But we will post some resources. I think it's a great question as we get more information about some of the liability concerns.
Awesome. As a chamber CEO who's heavily involved, there's often a lot of miscommunication and misinformation out there. Do you have any recommendations of good sources to understand what's going on?
Yeah. So in general, we really have tried to vet all of the resource that we've posted on our website. We've tried to vet pretty heavily to make sure that we're not posting things that are kind of just frivolously posted all over the internet. So our website, I think, is a good place to start. The county and the city's web pages, I know they're doing the same thing. Business Oregon has a really great resource page for businesses. And again, we can post all these links and they are on the chamber's resource page. That's a really good place to go, I think. As the governor's requirements for different industries are coming out, all of those are going to be posted on those websites. Any really government website, I think, is probably the best bet for now. I'm assuming they mean related to this crisis, right? I think that a lot of the news outlets are going to do the best they can, but I would lean on a government website before I would maybe a Facebook link that you're finding that somebody else is posting. I know it's really hard to navigate that, and the government websites aren't going to get it perfect either, right? This is such a weird, constantly changing environment, but they are. That's what I would lean on. If you're being held responsible for some of these activities, I'd point to where you found it on their website. And I think that's the best and safest bet you have.
Yeah. Is there a company that you would recommend to purchase PPE from?
It's a really good question. So this is one that we've actually been working on as a chamber to try and figure out, can we mass source some of this PPE and then be able to distribute it out to our chamber members? And we are still working on that. Terra Tech is creating masks. Marley's
Monsters.
Thank you. Yes, Marley's Monsters, they're creating masks. Both of these companies are creating non-healthcare surgical masks, which is really the only requirement for a business is that they have a mask. It can be a cloth mask. So those are two resources locally. Western Shelters also is producing PPE when it comes to gowns and things like that. We're trying to check in to see what their availability is. We also have a link from the federal government, from the state, of other PPE resources that we can post as well. I believe that's on Business Oregon's webpage. So again, there'll be a link there with a lot of places where you could order PPE yourself.
Yep, that's awesome. So I know sometimes there's different opinions on chambers because we have two chambers so close together, the Springfield Chamber and the Eugene Chamber. Can you just speak to the collaboration that you've been doing with Bonnie and a little bit more of how people are working together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of unique that an area our size has two distinct chambers of commerce. I think that there's a ton of pros to that, right? This Eugene and Springfield are really very different and unique communities. Both of us have members in both communities and beyond. You know, our Eugene membership, we have folks in Medford, and we have folks in out in Florence, and we have folks in Cresswell. So we do have a diverse membership. But I will say that, you know, the Eugene and Springfield chambers have worked really well together when it comes to resources that we know all of our members are going to need, and that can be consistent no matter where you're at, right? So this business guide is a really good example of that. It's a guide that any business in the county can use. It was, you know, kind of signed off on by our county. It's statewide resources, so those are applicable anywhere. We also have had, you know, in the past, we coordinate on events. I think in the future, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for us to do more of that, right? People want to see stuff streamlined. We want to make sure that we're as efficient as possible. Bonnie is a great partner and a mentor to me in the industry. She's been in the industry for a really long time. And so we have a really good relationship with them. And I think we'll continue to find creative ways to work together.
Yep, totally echo that sentiment. I think it's awesome. I think they're great, and it's really great to collaborate with them. What are you personally hopeful for moving into the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, my staff knows that I am not the kind of person who is here's how we've always done it kind of person. To me, I think it kind of offers up some freedoms to try some things differently that people maybe would have been a little bit more hesitant to accept or adopt. And I don't just mean this from the chamber's perspective. I mean it industry wide and community wide. If there's something you've been burning to try and you weren't really sure when to do it now. People are expecting really different things. And I think folks are more open to innovation and creativity. And I think that that's something that's super exciting to me. You know, a lot of organizations, ours included, have operated the way we've operated for a really long time when it comes to our office structure and the digital resources that we use. And we've all sort of been pushed into this new world. And while some people are going to kick and scream and fight it still, a lot of people are just like, well, it's what we're doing, so let's keep doing it, which I think is exciting because it opens up new opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that's actually the end of the questions. We had a good string come in, and now
yeah. Are you in the Q&A as well?
Yeah, I'm in both.
Okay. I'm seeing some here. Matt Purvis says, we kept the curve remarkably flat, but do we or will we soon have capability to do contact tracking? So I did have a conversation with a rep from the county earlier this week, and they are accepting volunteers to do contact tracing. So as part of the reopening guidelines, some of the big picture gates that are put in place by the state is that each county is capable of doing tracking based on their population. So Lane County is having to increase the number of contact tracers that they have. They have professional contact tracers that are always working, that I think none of us probably, or a lot of us, had no idea that that was something that someone in our county was doing before all of this. But so they have those professionals, but they are now opening up to volunteers. So on the county website, you can go and figure out how to find where you can volunteer to do contact tracing. In the Back to Business guide that we put out, there is a sheet in the appendix that this county has provided for businesses to use as they're starting to reopen to track the contacts who are coming in and out of their business. At this point, it's not required, but in the case that there is a breakout and someone is tracked back to your organization or to your business, as a way to prevent having to blast out that, you know, so-and-so got coronavirus and they had dinner X restaurant. If you are able to show your contact tracing, they will be able to use that resource instead of maybe having to go more public and asking people to come forward. So from a business perspective, I know sometimes the privacy component of asking people to put their name in their, when they were in your restaurant, there's definitely, a decision that you have to make. But if you voluntarily decide to do so, it is something that the county can use if there is, heaven forbid, an outbreak that is somehow tied back to your place of business.
Yeah, I think someone just answered or asked a question. I believe you just answered it, but I just want to make sure. They said, just heard that restaurants are going to be required to provide a log, which is contact tracing. Is it true? Who is going to hire this person? Can we hire this person?
So as of now, it's not required. Originally, it was in the draft requirements, but in the final version that came out, it is not required that you do that. So the county has put together, and we requested that they put together something that could be standardized that all businesses could use. So you didn't have to create your own. They've put together that resource for businesses. It's just a one-page Excel spreadsheet, essentially, that you can download and just have people sign on. So you aren't individually going to have to do any contact tracing. Really, it would just be a log of people who come in and out of your business. It is for restaurants. You do not have to do that. Personal services is a little different. You do need to be keeping track of your appointments. You do need to be making sure that you're finding out ahead of time if your customers have any of the symptoms. There's a lot of different requirements for personal services. So that's your massage, your hair salons, your tattoo parlors. So anybody in that personal services industry, you are going to have some different requirements when it comes to tracking folks who are coming in and out. So make sure, like I said, in that back to business guide, we've outlined all of those requirements.
And will that have to be submitted regularly or only if they're asked to submit it?
The way we understand it's only as if you're asked to submit it. There's nothing that's requiring you to proactively submit a business plan or a plan for reopening. However, I would keep track of it. I would write it out. I would have it documented because really what you're trying to do is protect yourself, protect your employees, protect your customers. And by consciously going through that list and making a list of how you're going to abide by each of those things, it's going to just set you up to be more successful in the future.
Yeah. Another question. Any news on a reduction cost from eWeb or Northwest Natural Gas if we are open on a limited basis?
That is a really good question. So I know eWeb was working on some programs initially. I don't actually know where those programs have been put at. So we're gonna have to do some follow-up work on that one. That's a really good question that I had not had before. And I see that that's an anonymous attendee. If you want to send me a private chat with who is asking that question, I can make sure to get back to you. Otherwise, we'll post it in the resources.
All righty. I don't see any new ones from Facebook.
All right. Is there any, I know we have folks coming in chat and on the question and answer. Any other questions that folks have? Thanks, Alicia. Nice comment there. I just want to continue to reiterate that we've been floored at how supportive our members have been, at the folks who've reached out and provided us with advice and feedback and ideas, the good, the bad, the ugly, for all of it, right? We want to make sure that the only way we can continue to do the best work for our members is to get that feedback and know that we're imperfect, but we're doing everything we can to try and support everybody the best we possibly can. We're excited to launch in the next couple weeks our business recovery work and our funding efforts. We have a lot of businesses who've stepped up to say, we want to come together and support this effort to get back to where we were. So I really appreciate it. If you're a small business who is struggling, please reach out to us. We really want to help you however we can. And one of the best ways we can do that is connecting you to resources that we can trust and that you can trust as well. So continue to reach out. We wouldn't be doing this work if we weren't obsessed with it. It's too hard to do it if you aren't in love. So all of my staff have been incredible, and they're here to serve. So please reach out. We want to do that however we can.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, we're throwing together some resources to try and make sure that if you're a business that's opening or about to open, we're trying our hardest to make sure that there's a platform where all that information can be in one place. So we've got a current website that was put together by amazing volunteers for restaurants. We've also got a open for business guide. If you're not a restaurant and you're in a different industry, but you want people to know your hours, we're working together to put that resource. And then also, if you're on social media and you have particularly an Instagram or a Facebook page, if you just tag us in your stories, then we can share it to our stories. And that's another quick way to get information out. We also have some advertising opportunities. So our goal is to make sure that your message gets across, and we've put together some great places. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. Just let us know that you're open, and we'd love to get that information out for you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'll get a grumpy text from my membership director if I don't mention that if you're watching and you're not currently a chamber member and you're interested in investing in this collective work that we're doing, please reach out. We'd love to have you. We have 1,200 members strong, and it's a really good group of businesses who are committed to the community, and they invest because they believe in the work that we're all doing together. So we really appreciate you all, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Absolutely. Take care,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.